If any one programme typified the values of Granada, it was to be Britain's longest-running soap opera.
Coronation Street came about because I was a young writer. I was under contract to Granada, and they didn't know what to do with me. They had me adapting Captain W.E. John's Biggles, and I didn't know anything about aeroplanes.
This is too much like playing soldiers.
Yeah, I can't... What?
They got our port wing, Smith!
Yeah, and I can't hold it either. Hold your hats on, we're going down.
So I climbed on top of a green tin filing cabinet in a Canadian executive producer's office and said, I'm not coming down until you let me write what I know about. And he said, well, what do you know about? So I said, well, I know about the north of England, and I know about show business. He said, well, show business is kiss of death, but how about writing me the story of a street out there? And he pointed through the window, and in those days there were hundreds of Coronation Streets going off in every direction. And I said to him, well, as a matter of fact, I've sent off an idea like that to the BBC. And he said, well, what happened? I said, well, they acknowledged safe receipt of it, but they haven't reacted. And I'm still waiting for their reaction, and it's 33 years later.
Coronation Street.
Oh, what's wrong with Coronation Street? I've never heard you talking that way before.
Well, I never pretended to sue, or anybody for that matter, that I came from anywhere else, but... Well, I just don't fancy the idea of her actually seeing it.
Well, it has its good points. I mean, take Ina Sharples. Now, I reckon your friend would lap her up.
My place of worship is the Rover's Return, and I'll swap brown ale for me and book any day.
You see?
I think he created almost the greatest set of well-known fictional characters outside Dickens. It also very much conformed to a Granada idea that it was about, or seemingly about, very real life among working-class people in the north.
Hello, love.
Hello, Mrs. Walker.
You do look happy.
Oh, can I have 20 cigarettes?
Bess?
Please.
Evening.
Half a mile. And how's our local genius, then?
All right.
I've not seen your name in paper recently. Haven't you been winning any more scholarships? It's all right for some.
What are you up to these days?
Damn all.
Granada soon established a reputation for two things: quality drama and crusading journalism. In the late 1950s, the BBC, cautious as ever, refused to cover by-elections for fear of contravening the Representation of the People Act. And so it was that in 1958, when I, then an ITN newscaster, stood as a Liberal candidate in the Rochdale by-election, the pioneer in Granada stepped in and won a notable first.
Our cameras are inside the counting room at Rochdale Town Hall, and Brian Inglis is waiting there for you.
Good evening. I'm standing right inside the counting room at Rochdale. Around me, the count to decide this first television by-election is going ahead energetically.
Granada decided, characteristically, because this is the sort of thing Sidney Bernstein was big on, that democracy would only work in Britain if television played its part in that process, and that involved helping people to make choices at elections. And so they persuaded all the three main political parties to allow their candidates at that by-election to take part in programs which Granada produced.
Yes, there's Mr. Kennedy now, facing us. He's hidden behind, now you can just see his face. He's slightly hidden behind that man here. He's facing across. Yes, that's him. Now you can see him full face. Well, you could for a moment.
The Labour candidate, Jack McCann, won. And I remember somebody at Granada telling me that Morgan Phillips, the General Secretary of the Labour Party, hadn't agreed that Labour could take part in this programme until they foxily put their man, McCann, in front of a television camera to see what the result would be, and he was very good at it, and so they went ahead and did it.
Flushed with that success, I think in the 1959 election we must have done the most boring programme in the history of world television, which was called Marathon.
Hello again, this is the Election Marathon, fourth day on the air. In this series of programmes, Granada gives to every candidate in the northern region the chance to address you, the electors. But there's one legal point. The law says that if in any constituency one candidate can't or won't take part, then his opponent can't either, so there will be some gaps.
I had to sit there with a little stopwatch and give them a minute each to explain why it is they wanted to vote.
I seriously say this to all pensioners. If they want to secure the very basis...
Sorry, Mr. Winston Jones, time's up. I must interrupt.
The driving force behind Granada's aggressive journalism of that time was a brash young Australian, Tim Hewitt. His dramatic visual approach to his subjects was first seen in Searchlight.
London to Birmingham motorway is only a week old today, but already it's blood-stained. It joins the thousands of roads in Britain which have seen injury or death. Tonight, Searchlight turns its beam on slaughter on the avenue.
The absolute essence of communication is to do something which grabs someone's attention and holds it. Therefore, every television show must have shots in it which are going to hold people's attention. And if you're going to talk about an abstract, which is 527 people killed this weekend on the roads, 527 doesn't mean anything, but if you put them down in High Street, Hampstead, litter the road with them, for your students, all over the bloody road, people realise it's a large number of people.
During the last year, 24 people were knocked down on this stretch of roadway. And this is not a black spot. It's in an area which is road conscious. But even here, the mass toll of victims makes a frightening picture.
We used to have a lot of trouble with the ITAs to check our scripts and rewrite the scripts and say, put this in and take that out and so on. I didn't realise that the balance or lack of balance comes from the decision to make the show. Sir Robert Fraser, who ran the ITA, who was the chief bureaucrat, he strenuously complained about Slaughter on the Avenue because it said, you know, it's unbalanced. Well, what balance do you want, Bob? Do you want some drunks saying that I drive better drunk? And he said, that's right.
Later, Hewitt favoured dispensing completely with presenters in vision and using film throughout. Thus was born World in Action.
A lot of the current affairs stuff on television was radio. Panorama classically was radio. You know, two blokes talking together like you and I are now. And what one had to do, I thought, was to put pictures on the air.
There is a disease which in Britain causes more death and pain and misery than in any other country in the world. The name of that disease is bronchitis. In Britain, bronchitis killed 39,148 people in 1963, the last full year for which official statistics are available.
The death rate from bronchitis in Britain is already twice that of Italy, which is the next worst sufferer, 13 times as high as in France, and 24 times higher than in the United States.
Tim got around him a team of enthusiasts, acolytes, and one or two quite good sort of sparring partners. They lived in a sort of territory of their own at the back of Golden Square. They didn't permit anyone else to come in. I had some difficulty getting in sometimes. They worked through the night. They had their own language, their own little sort of bar, which was used fairly heavily. And they developed what was the first tabloid screen journalism in Britain.
Zermatt's typhoid not only tarnished a shining reputation, it provoked rumours of local scandal, inefficiency, and a regard for money-making at the risk of holidaymakers' health.
Everyone there got food poisoning. And for some reason, I was intrigued. I'd never been there, but I was intrigued. I thought, you know, it's a bit like Samaritz, Jet Set, you know, bullshit centre. Let's go and have a look at how they're poisoning all these rich people.
It used to be said of Tim's World in Action that it was of such astounding visual literalness that if you had a commentary line saying that an idea had been pigeonholed, you'd have a shot of a pigeon followed by a shot of a hole.
Tonight, the epidemic which started in a cracked sewer in Zermatt is casting a shadow a third of the way round the world.
In Britain, the Ministry of Health announced tonight a new total of 55 confirmed cases. They stretch from Devon to the north of Scotland. And already one man, Mr. Frederick Smith, a 25-year-old draftsman of Weymouth in Dorset, has died.
While World in Action were fearless in taking on international scandals, at home they found a subject that revealed their limits.
Everybody would assemble round the big table and we'd rip the programme apart probably from the night before, and then there'd be suggestions for various other ones coming up. And on this particular occasion, Alex Valentine was the executive producer, and he suddenly just looked up and said, "Right, Mike, I want you and Brian to do a programme on Freemasonry." So it was like being sort of tossed a hand grenade, actually, with the pin out.
Because of the secrecy that surrounds all Masonic activities, Hodges and Moser were obliged to reconstruct with actors the rituals of Masonic initiation.
Let me assure you that in those vows there is nothing incompatible with your civil, moral, or religious duties. Are you therefore willing to take a solemn obligation founded on the principles I have stated, to keep inviolate the secrets and mysteries of the order?
I am.
Then you will kneel on your left knee, your right foot formed in a square. Give me your right hand, which I place on the volume of the sacred law, while your left will be employed in supporting these compasses, one point presented to your naked left breast.
I stepped into the lift in Golden Square, and who should be in the lift? No less than Dennis Foreman and Cecil Bernstein. Well, I didn't actually probably even know at that stage who Cecil Bernstein was. I certainly knew who Dennis Foreman was because he'd hired me. And he said, "Well, how are things going, Brian?" I said, "Oh, my God, Dennis, I'm having a hell of a job with the Masons. I can't get there. I can't get the real facts." Well, next door was Cecil Bernstein. Well, he was a Grand Master of one of the major lodges.
Alex Valentine and I were summoned to Manchester. And there was Mr. Sidney Bernstein, Cecil's brother. Sidney was very distressed because he said, we've never ever banned a programme in Granada before, but I'm afraid I can't let this programme go out on Masons. And so Alex and I protested, and he said, "Well, I have to say it's a family matter." He said, "Because of my brother, I just can't do it to my brother." And he actually was, when he was saying all of this to me, he was crying. It turned out, of course, that really it wasn't just Cecil who was a Mason, but a considerable number of the board of directors were also Masons.
What is this?
The grip or token of an entered apprentice Freemason.
In 1967, World in Action moved to Manchester with a new editor, David Plowright, who was to give the programme a fresh investigative edge.
When I took it over, I tried to marry the skills of good journalists with the skills of good film cameramen and film directors, and it became more photojournalism of an investigative nature.
A cold rendezvous in Geneva, Switzerland. 4 people heading for a 12-pound lunch. A pretty girl, a Frenchman in a camel hair coat, and 2 men trying to sell him 3 warships. The 2 men selling the warships are rather nervous. That's understandable. They don't have them. They are, in fact, World in Action reporters.
Merchants of War was an investigation into gun running to Biafra, and it was one of our first attempts to try and make this kind of investigation on film, and it was extremely risky. I only, in retrospect, realize how close we probably came to death, because we were double-crossing the CIA, we were double-crossing the Belgian Secret Service, we were hiding from the Portuguese secret police in Lisbon, and we were putting our trust in British intelligence, a fairly dangerous cocktail.
World in Action reporter, Angus MacDonald.
That luxury villa over there, in this Lisbon suburb, is number 16 Avenida de Torre. the Biafran headquarters in Europe.